Okay, let me ask General Prasad. Of course, the big backdrop to this is the India-China standoff. Just a few days ago, we had the pullback in the fourth place, which was PP15, Gogra Hot Springs. So I think in 4 out of the 6 places, there's been disengagement. 2 more, Depsang and Demchok, still remain. Do you see some kind of a bilateral meeting between Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of the SCO? And really, do you see the relationship overall between India and China coming back to any sense of normalcy until disengagement happens in all places?
Saka, first of all, let me say that this disengagement is important, but it is not really path-breaking. It is not something that we can say as a major achievement between India and China relationship. The standing policy of India, which has been enunciated by our foreign minister more than once, that unless this tension on the border is removed, unless the border issue resolved, relationship cannot be normal.
Yeah.
We cannot just do economic activity without having to solve the border issue. Today, the important things are 2 and 3, which you've been talking about ever since the program started. Where does India stand today? India stands today at a very simple, straightforward position which the entire world has recognized. We were non-aligned at one point in time. Today we are multi-aligned. Today we have a flexible alignment. The whole concept of SCO seems to have undergone a change. We were earlier talking about the terrorism and things. With the Ukraine war, with the power centers emerging, with the East versus the West coming up, there are clear-cut positions where India today stands amongst all the 8 countries attending at the biggest advantage, and I would say.
Okay.
Today, our geostrategic location, geographically, our position as an economic power, emerging economic power, gives us a leverage to see that the Chinese come to table to negotiate with us more on economic front, in the bargain resolving the border issues. So these are 2 linked. The point that needs to be made in the SCO conference is this, that India is an emerging economy. If Chinese have to improve their economy and to be sustaining as a world economic leader, India is an important part of it. And therefore, the India can only become an important part if you resolve the border issue to our satisfaction, which basically at the moment means removal from the Depsang plain and Demchok. Depsang plain is a very important strategic area for us, and there is no way we can let the Chinese sit there, as also Demchang. So therefore, today we are in a position to be able to talk to these people. Now the question is, should he meet the president of China? I don't see any harm. I don't see any harm in meeting if it's a bilateral or it's just a handshake, pullback handshake, as you may call it. But there is nothing wrong with it. In fact, I would go a step further to say there's nothing wrong in even meeting the Prime Minister of Pakistan and telling him clearly that you stop terrorism. We have extended a hand of friendship to you in the case of floods, but you have to come to table to talk to the matter, which is stop terrorism, and Kashmir is not in the agenda.
I was just going to come to that. I was just going to come to that. And if I can ask Ambassador Prakash about this, Prime Minister did tweet a few days ago expressing his condolences about the floods in Pakistan. There was some initial proposal to, I think, export wheat to Pakistan in a limited measure, again as a humanitarian gesture. But do you see any sort of formal traction in the relationship? It's been pretty much in the deep freezer, if you will. We don't even have ambassadors in both countries for the last couple of years at least. Do you see any kind of forward movement in the India-Pakistan bilateral relationship at the SCO?
Zaka, not at all. You know, the ball is absolutely in the Pakistani court. Yes, they are facing a calamity. We have expressed our sorrow. We have expressed our sympathy. If they were to seek India's assistance, I'm sure India will be more than happy to provide it. But this is one country which cuts the nose to spite its own face. If in this hour of need where people are having difficulties, they are still discussing whether or not to import vegetables from India, you can see the kind of dysfunctional setup that obtains today. The situation in Pakistan is quite grim. Prime Minister Sharif is not in a position to deliver. His position is shaky. We have always been an initiator of a dialogue. We want a dialogue, but today they are just not in a position to commit anything. Why should we increase the standing of Sharif by giving him a meeting? For what?
Okay.
So I don't think the situation is ripe at all for a meeting. And similarly, when it comes to Xi Jinping, there can today be only one agenda, and that is to vacate the aggression. For that, you cannot see Prime Minister meeting with the president, because he is not going to negotiate. Their leaders are not going to negotiate, and Xi Jinping is not a person who is given to gestures. So unless the aggression is vacated, I do not see any reason why the Indian Prime Minister should be meeting President Xi. Once the aggression is vacated, I'm all for engagement, all for discussions, but that does not, final point, courtesies, yes. Certainly, Prime Minister will and his Chinese counterpart should extend courtesies to each other. But a formal meeting, I am not in favor of.
GVL, I also want to talk a little bit about, this entire meeting is coming in the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war. It's going to go into its 7th month now. And that, of course, is having huge ramifications across the world in terms of inflation, in terms of the cost of living crisis, in terms of course, oil and gas prices. One of the pet peeves, if you will, that both Europe and the United States have with India and to an extent China as well, is that these countries, by buying Russian oil, are actually giving a breather to Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, Zaka, but on all these matters which are completely internal to India, we have always stated that we will take what is in our national interest, and we are not going to be swayed by considerations of other countries. So I don't think they have tried in the past to exert such influence on us, but they have failed. And India will do whatever it takes, whatever is in its national interest, and will not go by selfish considerations of some Western countries.
No, but again, it comes back to, here you have a grouping where Russia and China are clearly dominant. I mean, they were the founder members of this grouping along with the Central Asian republics. India needs the Central Asian republics now more so than ever before. We need connectivity into the Central Asian republics. You're seeing what is happening in Afghanistan. We have a hostile neighbor in Pakistan. If we need trade and connectivity, we need a way in through Iran into the Central Asian republics. But we've been talking about this for 20 years, GVL. We've been talking about North-South corridor for the last 20 years. We've been talking about Chabahar again for the last 2 decades. Yes, there is some work that's going on there. But given how intensely hostile the Iranian regime is to the West, how long will we continue talking about these connectivity projects, and how long before we actually see connectivity happening through these countries?
No, these are certainly projects in works, Zaka. Certainly, we have not given up on these connectivity projects, but certainly there are challenges. And the government and the Ministry of both the Foreign Affairs and the Economic Affairs, they are in the process of sorting out these issues. There are challenges, I would concede, but it is going to take time, and we will. Our plans to invest in these ports have certainly created certain disturbance in other countries. But as I said, we will go ahead with our intentions, even though it may take longer.
Ambassador